Sophia worked at one of the best hospitals in the city as a surgeon. It was her dream job. Her mother didn't approve of her daughter's choice to spend her life digging into human bodies, but saving lives was a noble mission. Sophia was a delicate and calm girl. She could have been a neurologist, an ophthalmologist, or a therapist. But she had said with determination, "I don't want to operate on people." During her time at the hospital, she showed her best side and had already been entrusted with a complicated surgery by the management. They often called her even on weekends and holidays, saying, "Dear, if you keep dedicating all your time to work, you'll never get married." Home is not the main goal of life for a woman, her mother said. Sophia replied indifferently, "You're crazy. You're a woman too, and you know that women age faster." "Time is running out," said her mother. "Then let time take me," Sophia replied. The last time she was in a relationship was in college. She was in love with a classmate, but he cheated on her with her best friend. Since then, Sophia had distanced herself from her friends so that she wouldn't have to endure that pain again. But she was beautiful, with blonde curls, porcelain white skin, and brown eyes. She was like a doll, but this doll had a strong character. Her profession was taking its toll. That night, Sophia had already left the hospital. It had been a long day with 2 scheduled surgeries in the morning, and then she operated on a man after a car accident for several hours. Now his life was not in danger, but she was exhausted. She walked along the sidewalk of the hospital park and wished to go to her apartment with her mother, take off her boots and coat, and go straight to the bathtub. There, she would spend a whole hour in the snow-white foam of a blackberry bubble bath. Then she would go to bed and fall into a sweet sleep all of a sudden. She heard a heavy moan. Sophia stopped and looked around, perplexed. It was getting dark and freezing tonight. Sophia shivered from the cold and looked towards the nearby bushes. It seemed like the groans were coming from there. "Who's there?" she asked loudly and boldly, walking towards the large bush while turning on the flashlight on her phone. In the next second, she saw a man lying in the bush, writhing in pain, gasping and trying to say something, but all that came out of his throat was more like a groan. Sophia approached, saw the man, and recoiled. He was a homeless man, dressed in rags, with long, dirty hair and a graying beard. The smell confirmed once again that he was a man who had hit rock bottom in society. Maybe he had been drinking, she thought hesitantly, but immediately realized she was trying to find a reason not to approach him. She immediately felt ashamed. After all, she was a doctor and it was clear that he needed medical help. "Sir, are you okay? Do you need any help?" she asked, sitting down next to the homeless man. He looked at her with eyes filled with pain and despair, and just groaned again, holding his stomach. "I'm a doctor, let me examine you," Sophia said softly, gently touching the poor man with her hand. Her calm voice and kindness, which she had long forgotten, made her freeze. Sophia placed her hand on the man's abdomen and pressed gently. "Immediately," she said. She dialed the number for the emergency room of a hospital and requested medical help for a patient in the park. The receptionist was surprised and said, "But you need to call an ambulance from the free municipal hospital. Our hospital doesn't accept this patient. It's an expensive and decent hospital." Losing patience, Sophia said, "The man needs urgent surgery. He may not make it to another hospital. Send an ambulance here now." The receptionist couldn't disobey the commanding tone of Sophia's voice, and she immediately called for the doctors and paramedics to rush to the park with a stretcher. When the paramedics arrived and saw the man, they looked confused. "Are you sure we can take him to our hospital?" one of them questioned Sophia. "Are you suggesting we leave him here?" she said indignantly. "But he's a homeless man and we work at an expensive hospital," the paramedic replied. "First and foremost, he is a human being. Handle him with care and put him on the stretcher," Sophia ordered. The paramedic shrugged and did as the doctor instructed. Everyone in the emergency room was in shock, from the nurses turning pale to the janitors being surprised, and Derek, the attending physician, said he wouldn't perform the surgery. "I won't even go near that homeless man," he said. "I can do this on my own." Sophia smiled and ordered the nurses from the municipal hospital to take care of the homeless man. "Okay, girls, take care of this homeless man from the municipal hospital," Derek said. "And where are they taking him?" Sophia asked. "They take all of them like him there," the man replied, "but it's over an hour away, and he'll obviously get worse on that trip. He might die on the way." Sophia said coldly, "So you think we should just ignore and neglect all homeless people?" "Sophia, you are in a high-class hospital where rich and even millionaires come. He is dirty and smells. He may have an infection," said the attending physician, indignant. "A good cleaning of the operating room eliminates all problems," Sophia replied and rolled the homeless man on a stretcher into the room. The nurses hesitated but followed Sophia. They knew Sophia was right, but what would the chief doctor say? Mr. Edvaldo had already left, but he would find out later anyway. "Girls, I take full responsibility," Sophia said, seeing the doubt in the nurse's eyes. "Go ahead and wash up. I'll go to the operating room to prepare everything." The old anesthesiologist, Mr. Wilson, didn't say a word. He was a man of old habits, just like everyone else in the operating room. He appreciated Sophia's attitude and tried not to think about the reaction of the chief doctor, but he had no doubt that Edvaldo would create a scandal. The surgery was successful, though with difficulties. "Sophia, you made the right decision. If he had been sent to another hospital, he would have already died," Mr. Wilson told her. "Yes, that's exactly what I've been trying to tell everyone." Sophia felt relieved, but she knew she had to be ready to be reprimanded by Edvaldo, the chief doctor. "But why isn't Mr. Edvaldo humane? I mean, who's going to pay for this mess? He doesn't even have an identity," Mr. Wilson reminded her. "Jesus, he'll only be in our hospital for a few days, then we'll transfer him to the municipal hospital." She was too naive, but Sophia was sure that the chief doctor would understand her. She went back home after midnight, already forgetting about taking a shower. She just quickly washed her face, went to bed, and collapsed onto the pillow, falling into a deep sleep. In the morning, a phone call woke her up. It was the chief doctor from the hospital, yelling on the phone that Sophia caused antigenic conditions and violated regulations. "What should I do now?" "Put the hospital in quarantine," Mr. Edvaldo yelled. "Because, we did all the tests, even a chest x-ray on that man. There's nothing wrong with him. He's healthy. Mr. Edvaldo, he would have died if we hadn't operated," Sophia calmly replied. "But why do you care? Is he your father, brother, husband, or friend? That beggar has been dead to society for a long time. Such a man has no place in the world," said the chief doctor. "Mr. Edvaldo, I'm sorry, but your reasoning is not that of a doctor," Sophia used to say. "How dare you speak like that to the chief doctor?" he yelled. "You're fired." We'll submit the resignation papers, and you can forget about your salary and labor rights because they will cover the hospital's losses." "What kind of losses?" Her hands trembled, and then the chief doctor hung up. Sophia was beside herself after the conversation. She didn't even realize tears were streaming down her face. She just stood by the window, and the tears rolled down her cheeks. "My dear, are you crying?" Her mother approached her slowly. "Who were you talking to?" "It was the chief doctor," Sophia said, wiping her tears. "Mom, I got fired." Then she told her mother the whole story. Her mother listened and just shook her head. "My God, what a difficult time we're living in." "He thinks you did the wrong thing," the woman wondered. "Mom, all that matters to people like Mr. Edvaldo is status and money. Human life has no value to him." "It's okay, dear. Don't worry. You did the right thing. I'm sure someone in heaven is watching everything that's happening. It will all come back to you tenfold." Her mother hugged Sophia. "I hope so, but now I'm unemployed. How are we going to survive? I'll look for a new job, but I think Mr. Edvaldo will make sure I'm blacklisted from hospitals. In that case, I won't be able to get a job at any hospital." "Doesn't matter. You could be a pharmacist. I mean, they make good money," her mother said. "Mother, I'm only used to saving people through surgery, not selling medications, but maybe you're right." "Well, we'll see." Meanwhile, Mr. Edvaldo was already calling other hospitals and telling the chief doctors not to hire Sophia under any circumstances. Then there was a knock on the door of his office and a concerned assistant entered. "Mr. Edvaldo, we have an inspection today," your secretary said nervously. "I just received a call from my friend. She's a secretary at the Ministry of Health. She warned me that they were coming for an unscheduled inspection." "I can't believe it!" Mr. Edvaldo shouted. "This is the last thing I need. Did they already take that homeless man? We're not expecting an ambulance." The assistant replied, "When will the ambulance arrive?" The man was angry. He dialed the phone number of the head of the therapeutic department and shouted at them to remove the homeless man from the hospital. "I don't care if you throw him LOL under a bush. An inspection from the Ministry of Health is on the way, and this unregistered, unexamined homeless man with no identification needs to be taken to the other side of the park. Let the municipal hospital ambulance take him from there," the chief doctor shouted. "But it's cold outside, it's autumn," he replied, "but it's not winter yet." "You can cover him with a blanket," he advised. Nurses were taking a patient on a stretcher towards the exit when officials from the Ministry of Health appeared at the entrance. They had already passed, but one man showed interest and followed them. "Where exactly are they taking the patient, and where is the ambulance?" asked the inspector. "It should have been here by now," replied Mr. Edvaldo with a smile. "We performed an emergency operation on the patient, and it was successful. Now we are transferring them to another hospital for further treatment." The Ministry of Health official turned and looked out the window. He saw that the ambulance had indeed stopped. He walked past the patient, but suddenly looked at the patient's face and froze. "Father," the man exclaimed and rushed towards the stretcher. "It's you." Everyone looked confused. The man's colleague walked up to the stretcher as well. "Nathaniel, you must be mistaken," he said. He looked at the man on the stretcher and choked up. "Mr. Favio, is that really you?" The patient on the stretcher just looked at them with confusion, but kept his eyes on Nathaniel. They knew each other, but something had happened that left the man confused, and he couldn't remember where he knew this young man from. But the man called him father, so this must be his son. "Father, do you recognize me?" Nathaniel looked at the familiar facial features and couldn't believe that his father, whom they had been searching for the past 2 years, having lost hope of finding him alive, was lying in front of him on a stretcher. He was thin, with a beard and long hair almost down to his shoulders. It had been over a year since Mr. Fabio had celebrated his 16th year of retirement. He had a large business of medical equipment and wanted his son to leave his position at the Ministry of Health and join the business, but Nathaniel was stubborn, saying he liked his job and that business was not for him. This made Mr. Fabio very sad, as he wondered who would manage the business. He had a stepson who was a little older, but Paolo was frivolous and would ruin everything very quickly. However, there was no choice. Mr. Fabio signed a power of attorney for him and started teaching the essentials to his stepson gradually. Then Mr. Fabio was attacked. He was driving his car when another car cut him off, and some thugs got out of the car and beat him on the head. He only remembered falling into the river with the car. He managed to get out of the car sinking and then woke up on the beach. His head hurt, and he could barely feel his arms and legs, and most importantly, he couldn't remember anything. 2 beggars were warming themselves by the fire on the beach. Mr. Fabio approached them. They saw an old man with a bloody head and offered to help. They wanted to accompany him home, but he couldn't remember where to go. The beggars didn't want to go to the police with him, so they just kept him company. That's how Mr. Fabio became a synth with no memory and no past. The police informed Fabio's relatives that they found the car in the river but not the body, but the river has a strong current, so they could search for years and find nothing. Nathaniel didn't believe his father was dead and continued searching for him. Despite being in the same city, they always walked on different streets and never met. Paolo, the stepson, quickly assumed the role of the company's boss and started running the business his way, but he managed it in such a way that the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Nathaniel became furious because his brother nearly drove their father's business to bankruptcy. How are they going to tell their father when he returns? People don't come back to life after death. Paolo smiled, but Mr. Fabio was back. Yes, it was him on the stretcher. Nathaniel immediately instructed them to take his father to the room and ensure that he received the best care. No one would contradict him now. The chief physician was giving orders on what to do and how to do it. Nathaniel had no idea where they wanted to take his father. He had forgotten about it, as he was preoccupied with something else, how to recover his father's memory. It was clear that he was suffering from amnesia, but it would be permanent. But then he overheard 2 nurses talking. He was standing in the ward and the girls were conversing in the corridor. They were sure it was a homeless person, one of them was saying. Mr. Edvaldo is doing everything possible to please him now, but he still fired Sophia because she saved a human life. Exactly, I feel sorry for the girl. There are few doctors as talented as Sophia. So the other nurse responded, but there will always be injustice. Maybe we should tell the Ministry of Health official who saved Mr. Edvaldo's father and who ended up getting fired for it, the nurse suggested to her colleague. Oh no, Mr. Edvaldo will punish us for that, she said. Then Nathaniel appeared behind the door and said, "Excuse me, ladies, but I heard everything." He said without mincing words, "Tell me what really happened." The nurse blushed and hesitated at first. However, Nathaniel could also fire them if he wanted to, so they were afraid they wouldn't keep the secret. They told him how they found Nathaniel's father and how Sophia operated without listening to anyone's objections, and how the chief physician yelled at her when he fired her. They also told him that Mr. Edvaldo wanted to throw the patient out on the street so that the Ministry of Health inspectors wouldn't see the unidentified homeless person in the hospital. After hearing them, Nathaniel went to the office of the chief doctor. The doctor was happy. The inspection would never happen. He could relax now. The fact that the beggar was the inspector's father, he thought it was even beneficial for him. He was ready to tell how he had saved an old man in his hospital. Yes, they wanted to transfer the patient to another hospital, but it was all within protocol. He didn't expect the team to betray him, but everyone was tired of his arrogance and bad mood. "You don't have to worry, Mr. Edvaldo," Nathaniel said with a forced smile as he saw the chief doctor at the door of his office. "Your father is in one of the best hospitals. I'll make sure he gets the best treatment." "I don't doubt that," he replied awkwardly, sitting in front of the chief doctor and looking him in the eyes. "Because now you know who his son is, but before that, you wanted to throw him out like a stray dog." "You're mistaken," Mr. Edvaldo said nervously. "You also fired the girl who saved my father," Nathaniel continued. "She wanted to quit," the chief doctor said, lying. "Liar. I know the truth. Go to that girl now and convince her to come here," Nathaniel said. "Understood," the chief doctor said, feeling defeated, and he rushed out of the office, leaving Nathaniel alone. When Sophia saw the chief doctor at the threshold of her apartment, she was confused. Had he decided not to send the dismissal papers, but to bring them himself? "Sophia, forget everything I told you. I made a mistake, I'm sorry. Let's go to the hospital. The son of that old man you operated on is waiting for you there. Sophia, you did a great job. It turns out that you operated on one of the executives from the Ministry of Health, and now he's the father of the executive." What was the executive's father doing on the street, she wondered. "It's a complicated story. I think the police will handle it now," said the man. Sophia hesitated, but she loved her job. She had to overcome her pride and go to the hospital with Mr. Edvaldo. Nathaniel, seeing the young surgeon, was surprised. "She's so young and not afraid to go against the boss. That's very brave. Go back to work. Nobody will fire you again." Mr. Edvaldo realized his mistake. He nodded to the girl, embarrassed. Sophia could hardly contain her laughter, as it was the first time Mr. Edvaldo looked so pathetic. Several months passed, and Mr. Fabio was discharged from the hospital. Sophia was working at the hospital, and everyone had forgotten about the incident. Then the news spread throughout the city. The police discovered that Mr. Fabio's stepson, Paolo, was responsible for attempting to take his life. He had ordered it to be done to his stepfather because he couldn't wait to inherit his business. He decided to escalate the process, and now he's in jail. Mr. Fabio regained his memory but decided not to go back to the business. Instead, he's enjoying a normal old age with his loving son. Later, Paolo was granted parole only because Nathaniel hired a good lawyer. His father asked him to do it. He didn't want his stepson to be imprisoned as it would ruin his life. After the trial, Paolo moved to another city and had no further contact with the family. "How could a human being do such a thing?" the chief doctor said when he learned the details. His colleagues heard, but they just nodded and smiled. Mr. Edvaldo had no right to talk about honor and morality. Later, there was an inspection at the hospital, and they found out that the chief doctor had embezzled state funds. All the funds provided by the state to the hospital went into Mr. Edvaldo's pocket. He was tried and ended up on parole as well. Now he no longer speaks about honor and morality. He was suspended from the medical profession. Sophia still works as a surgeon, but now after a day's work, she's not rushing home to her mother, but to a date. Yes, she's dating Nathaniel, and they will soon get married. He's a little older than Sophia, but age difference doesn't matter because love knows no boundaries.